Welcome back to State of the Nation. Some of you may remember when Tony Blair was heckled at the Women's Institute with a slow hand clap disturbing his speech. That was in the year 2000, 3 years after Blair secured his landslide 179-seat majority. Meanwhile, this was the Labour Party conference after just 3 months since taking office.
This is a really busy conference, and we are trying to accommodate as much as we can. Wait for it, come on.
During the Chancellor's speech, there was even more discontent.
We are still selling arms to Israel. I thought we were voting for change, Rachel. Climate breakdown is on our doorstep.
Reminds me of Theresa May. Anyway, day after day, scandal after scandal emerges and the discontent is bubbling from both the public and within the party. Over the weekend, it emerged the Education Secretary, Bridget Phillipson, had her birthday party paid for by the same donor who appears to be the main source of champagne for the Socialists, Lord Ali. I give the floor to GB News' very own Camilla Tominey.
An official do for you as Shadow Education Secretary, but you also had some cake.
Oh, we didn't have any cake.
Oh, there's a picture of you with some cake. Is that a different?
That was on my actual birthday.
Oh, got it. Okay.
In my office.
Ali, so you do have a birthday celebration,
Yeah.
but it's part of a department.
It was when I was Shadow Education Secretary, so it was ahead of the election. I should just say I didn't even invite my own family along to this. It was very much in a professional
Has Lord
context.
Ali ever donated to your wardrobe, your spectacles? Has he ever loaned you an apartment in London or New York?
No, everything that's been donated to me has been declared in line with the rules.
Oh, it's always in line with the rules, isn't it, that old chestnut? It's also emerged that Angela Rayner may have broken parliamentary rules as she did not declare that she was staying with a gentleman friend at Lord Ali's £1.8 million New York apartment. Another revelation regarding the Chancellor's clothing. She initially declared the donations as office expenses, novel way of referring to clothes, rather than as frocks, until she was forced to come clean amidst the growing scandal. All of this culminated in some cabinet ministers finally confessing that they will now pay for their own clothes, which is big of them, while the Standards Commission is being asked to investigate for a second time. Not only does this make the Prime Minister and his cabinet look greedy and grubby, but the Reverend Starmer and his mates are benefiting from a tax loophole. Under HMRC's rules, if someone receives a gift worth more than £250 because of their status of employment, it is taxable and must be declared. It doesn't include entertainment. But members of Parliament are office holders rather than employees, which means they're exempt from this little rule. In other words, for the Labour MPs and their spouses, it's free frocks all around. But for the rest of us, well, we must all pay the taxman, or the taxman will be after us. In the United Kingdom, in which a dustman must declare his Christmas tips to HMRC, it is remarkable that politicians can get away with not paying tax on these lavish donations. Isn't this just the kind of tax avoidance that Rachel Reeves usually wants to stop? As always, let me know your views, mailmog@gbnews.com. But I'm now joined by former Labour MP and one of our favourite socialists, Stephen Pound. Stephen, come on. You have a reputation for being one of the most proper MPs when you were in Parliament.
Well, the Daily Telegraph called me a saint, which I felt like suing them.
All right. Aren't you ashamed of quite how greedy Keir Starmer's been?
I have to say, I'm not delighted by the whole business, obviously. I mean, I don't think anybody would. But look, in all honesty, this is actually not a huge story, in all honesty. This is, nobody died, no rules were broken. I know you say this about, it's the rules. Well, the rules are important. And I don't think look, with hindsight, I don't think anybody would have done it.
£107,000 of freebies for Starmer, 2.5 times number 2 in the list of recipients, who is another Labour MP.
Yeah, no, it's quite extraordinary. I must admit, I just feel I rather missed out because of it. What was interesting was I remember being given a bottle of wine once, and I wasn't sure what it was worth because I'm not a great enophile. And I was told that there's a woman who lurks in the upper committee corridor in a little cubbyhole there, whose sole job it is to price wine to make sure that it's actually not worth £250. Now, the idea of any wine short of a Petrus or a Chateau Lafite or something that's in your cellar being worth £250 was completely beyond me. But what I used to do, people sometimes, it would be more awkward to give it back than to take it. So I used to give it to the staff.
Now, I don't mind people using the tax rules to their advantage. I think it's perfectly legal, and tax avoidance is perfectly legal. But Rachel Reeves is very against tax avoidance. She's very po-faced about it. She wants to clamp down on private equity and people like that who use avoidance schemes. she seems to be using one herself to get her dresses paid for. Again, doesn't it look hypocritical?
I don't know if it's tax avoidance, as you quite rightly point out, and it's not the only case where, members of Parliament do seem to have an unfair advantage. I mean, you talked about Tony Blair being slow handcuffed. Don't forget, it was just after we won in that glorious spring of 1997 that we had the Bernie Ecclestone affair. Now, that was absolutely appalling, when somebody who was afraid that we would actually ban cigarette advertising on racing cars, Formula One, gave the Labour Party £1 million. A couple of years later, we won another landslide.
But isn't this part of the point that Tony Blair actually had the wit to take that head on? He did a really long interview with John Humphreys. He says, trust me, or words to that effect.
I'm a pretty straight sort of
fellow, guy, or whatever it was.
I hope he didn't say that.
Anyway, he managed to take on the opprobrium, deal with it, and paid the money back. Starmer has spent weeks saying, all politicians do this, I need a decent suit, security of the nation means I've got to go into the best box in town costing thousands of pounds. He hasn't realised that this matters and that people don't like it. And Blair just had a much finer political antennae.
Well, I think he did. I mean, Tony Blair used to say that he had been at the Gallowgate end at St James's Park watching Newcastle when Jackie Milburn was playing, despite the fact that Jackie Milburn, I think, stopped playing before he was born. But look, I'll tell you what slightly worries me about this is Rishi Sunak, and I'm not his greatest fan, he would sit in the stands at Southampton. Down at St Mary's. And so I can understand the security thing. That if the Prime Minister's security people said, no, you cannot sit there, then if I would sit in a box, but I would pay for it.
But it seems very unlikely that the leader of the opposition's security team were telling the leader of the opposition he needed higher security than the Prime Minister.
I think it's slightly different in the case of the Labour Party because of the Islamic issue. All Labour MPs, and even, sadly, ex-Labour MPs, get targeted by some people. We saw that chap standing up there talking about, don't sell weapons to Israel, and I don't think we are selling any weapons to Israel. But, this does happen all over the place. So I think it's slightly different.
But Rishi Sunak, as Prime Minister, would inevitably have had a higher risk than any leader of the opposition. It just goes with the job. And that actually Rishi Sunak had a becoming modesty about the way he held office. And I wasn't his greatest supporter, but he never seemed to be exuding a feeling of entitlement. And it's this feeling of entitlement that we are the masters now, we're going to enjoy it. Bridget Phillipson, £14,000 for a birthday party paid for by somebody else, and, I didn't invite my family, it wasn't a real one.
Well, I mean, I have to say, Rishi Sunak probably didn't have to worry too much about the price of his suits, to be perfectly honest. But, the We Are the Masters now, the Hartley-Shawcross thing back in 1945. I remember when Tony Blair won in 97, he got all of us together and he said, just remember this, we are the servants now. And that was a very, very important point.
And that's the bit that Starmer has missed. It's this sense of entitlement.
Well, let's hear what he says on Wednesday when he makes his speech, because he's got some ground to make up. Let's be honest about this. I mean, I'm Labour to my bootstraps, and I will defend the Labour Party usually with my dying breath. But I'm not going to pretend that, that this is, I'm Dr. Pangloss here. I mean, there is an issue to be faced, and I'm pretty sure that he's astute and cute enough to realise it's got to be faced head on, and I think he will do that this week.
So what would your advice to him be? How do you get this back? I mean, it's too late now to say...
Well, give back the suits, they've slightly worn, aren't they?
They're worn, or the glasses. It just looks a bit ridiculous. Yeah. Do you ban ministers from taking future gifts? But then... The issue here is that ministers have been going to a lot of events, and Lady Starmer as well, that they really want to go to and getting free tickets. But ministers have to go to events that they don't want to go to, that are expensive but a duty. Now, how do you differentiate between those if you start having a ban on hospitality?
Well, I'm pretty sure that attending the CBI is probably more important than attending a Taylor Swift concert. So the things you may not particularly want to go to. I think Keir Starmer's kids were very keen to see Taylor Swift, as is two-thirds of the world.
But I mean, I wouldn't be interested in that. But
you've just broken our heart.
Isn't that misusing your public office to get it for your children?
I know.
There's one thing you've got to go as a public duty, but it's just so greedy.
No, I think what he says, and what he says is, look, hands up here. If I had my time again, I wouldn't have done it. I'm going to make this right. I'm going to actually establish that we do have proper rules, proper requirements within that. And don't forget, there is the mechanism within Parliament. As you know, Boris Johnson was found guilty on a number of occasions. Nothing like that has happened here. But I think he should actually offer some restitution. Maybe, give money to charity. I don't know. I think you can't, as we've just admitted, you don't hand back the suits. I mean,
it's too late.
It's indeed. Or they might have a certain amount of sort of Madame Tussauds value.
But isn't it hard to claw back? Because Lord Ali got a pass. It's the general trend of the behaviour. It's if you're a Labour supporter, if you're a train driver, you get a big pay rise. If you're a pensioner, you lose your fuel allowance because you voted Tory. And it just seems so tribal on a 33% share of the vote.
Well, first of all, anyone who thinks that the train drivers are sort of root and branch Labour supporters has never obviously been to a meeting with ASLEF or RMT, believe you me. But look, Lord Annie was a parliamentarian. He is a parliamentarian. He was given a 2-week temporary pass for the transition period when we moved into Downing Street. I think that's defensible.
And that had nothing to do with giving hundreds of thousands of pounds.
No passes for glasses.
No passes for glasses. Well, there we go.